Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, February 27th, 2017. I'm sorry I need to put a stop to this. The host of today's show is Greg Dworkin. I did not win the prize for hosting the show today. I actually I'm culturally relevant. I understand what happened at the Oscars last night. Sort of. To the extent anyone understands it. I actually tried to watch some of the show yesterday, not really, because I was super interested in what was happening, but it was on television. People were talking about it. Nothing else was going on. My wife decided she wanted to turn it on too. My kids said, "Oh, Oscars, that's something relevant. Turn it on," and then they ignored it. And then I finally said, "All right, nothing interesting is happening. I'm going upstairs." They got around to the Best Picture part. I said, "I'm going to go up and go to bed," and that's when all the excitement happened. So I am up to date. I am aware of all internet trends regarding the announcement of the wrong winner last night. There's lots of speculation about how that happened. I think sounds like they tried to pin this on all sorts of people last night, but apparently there are two sets of those cards, and the two auditors from PricewaterhouseCoopers, I guess it is, who keeps track of all the voting, and we're the only people who know who won before the announcement is made. Note that they never leak, by the way. I've never heard of the Oscar winners leaking. So, note to Donald Trump, note to the White House. It can be done. And apparently there are two sets of the cards on either side of the stage, depending on which side of the stage the presenters decide to emerge from, and also as a backup. And I don't really know what the system is there. For a while, people were speculating that maybe, I guess you get the card, they open up the thing and they say who the winner is, and I guess not only do you get an Oscar, but the real prize, suitable for framing, I'm sure, is the card that has your name on it, or your movie on it if you're a producer, but it would also have your name on it. Anyway, the speculation was that for some reason the prior announced winner, Emma Stone, apparently for La La Land, there you go. I know what happened. Didn't take her card with her, and then it somehow got, maybe Leonardo DiCaprio, who was presenting the Oscar, didn't properly handed off to her, and so it got back into circulation. But that was circulated as a rumor very briefly, to which Emma Stone, this is very important that you know this, put that rumor to rest. I have my card. I got it. Nobody did anything wrong with that. There's two sets. Why the people who handle the cards don't have a box that they chuck the cards of already announced awards into, I don't know. I don't know what happened. There was a mix-up. It's never happened before. I don't know whether this is something you fire anybody about. Does it really matter who counts them? So long as they typically get it right and hand the right cards to people. I don't know. Anyway, very exciting, and all sorts of metaphors for that in the election, and people wondering whether they were going to finally get around to announcing the correct winner of the presidency. No such luck. We are on to week 6 of The Presidential Apprentice, and it should be a rather exciting one. And, of course, let's see. Bill has started us off with a morning tweet. Daily Coast Radio is live. Kagro X, that's me, throws candy and flowers from his roof as Trump's Defeat ISIS Day arrives. True. It's a reference both to national events and cultural events like the Oscar. Because didn't the candy come from the roof last night? I saw that. They were dropping little parachutes with food in it. And that was very clever. So a lot of the cool bits from the thing. I didn't really care about anything in terms of who wanted to root for anybody. I didn't see any of these movies. I'd like to. I just never get around to it. I'm very lazy. And anyway, so I just wanted to let you know I had seen part of a cultural event that happened on television yesterday, and I'm pretty happy about having had the chance to see that. And, today in politics, so this week 6 involves a number of things. Tomorrow is, tomorrow's Tuesday. Tuesday will be the day that Trump gives his first address to a joint session of Congress. You'll remember from years past, that is not a State of the Union address. A new president's first address to a joint session, for whatever reason, is not formally designated a State of the Union address. We all refer to it as such anyway because it's an annual event. But I guess this is like the most reasonable thing Congress does is to not expect of a brand new president that they can address the state of the nation after only a week in charge, if they've been in charge at all. So that you'd think that sounds like a new rule that they made for Trump, because there's no way he would know what was going on. But it's in fact a long-standing rule, and quite a reasonable one at that. It doesn't make any difference one way or the other. He'll insist it's a State of the Union address anyhow, I'm sure. And he'll tell you that the State of the Union is beautiful, fantastic, terrific, wonderful, the best, world-class, etc. And I was going to kick everybody's butt. Today is day 30, just to clarify things, day 30 since his signature of a presidential memorandum, not an executive order, technically speaking, but a presidential memorandum ordering his generals at the Pentagon to come up with a plan to totally defeat ISIS and wipe them off the map. And word is they might actually have come up with one. General Mattis, now Secretary Mattis, is apparently competent to this task and has put something together, but this was a promise during the campaign that was going to be a day one. Day one, I'm going to bring you my plan, and on day one, I'm going to give the generals 30 days to come up with an of their own, and we'll compare it and see whether mine isn't in fact better, because I know better than the generals. It took them 8 days to get around to the task of asking the generals to prepare their 30-day plan. So there you have it. That's the kind of guy he really is. It turns out Mattis may have something, and during the campaign, of course, Trump suggested that he had such a plan of his own, a secret plan up his sleeve. And it turns out it seems like that's turning out. I would like to use the F-35 fighter somehow. And the Air Force says, we're not ready for that, but even if we were, I'm not really sure why that would defeat ISIS, but we'll read all about it. In the meantime, Greg Dworkin is here to tell us who actually won the Oscars. Good morning, Greg.
Well, it's a funny thing, because one other angle of this that you haven't touched upon, but which occurred to me, I didn't watch that spot until this morning, heard all about it, and had to go look, and I saw the video and such like that. And the La La Land producer, was incredibly spontaneously gracious, Jordan Horowitz.
Yes.
Who in the middle realized what was going on and said, no, it wasn't us, it was them. I mean, this award was just snatched from him, calls the Moonlight people. Very, very gracious, very nice to see. But it occurred to me that the Oscars are also brand sponsored.
Yes.
And what was running through my head as I'm watching this is Samsung, who makes phones that blow up, is sponsoring the Best Movie Award.
What, is that right?
The Best Movie Award brought to you by Samsung. Well, they were one of the Oscars.
They caught on fire. I saw Rolex was too, and they are known for their
Rolex
precision.
tend to not catch on fire, but I saw this and said, this particular award must have been Samsung.
Really? Well, it certainly could have been. It was a bit of a disaster. It was easier to. I'll say this: it's easy to be gracious when they won a bunch of Oscars, and that's good.
Yeah, but
and
listen,
terrific,
everybody would trade like the other 14 for this one or whatever the number was.
Yeah, this is a big deal. But so I'm glad it was.
I like
glad it worked out. And it
everything
was
about the Oscars revolves around this. This is the key award.
Yeah,
brought to you by Samsung.
Well, they did a pretty good job with it. It made for an exciting end. I thought it was a little weird that I was a little puzzled with the choice of Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway to do. I mean, they're obviously long-time, accomplished top actors and actresses, but
who obviously just read their lines.
Yes,
They saw the card and didn't realize what was going on.
He did, and she didn't because she didn't have the card in her hand.
He did, and then he showed the card to her, and they still went with it.
Well, he
said, lines. You don't argue with the person who wrote the lines.
I'd love to know what was going on because, a lot of people, you see what you want to see.
This is acting, not improv.
And a lot of people Beatty saw that there was a problem. Didn't know how to solve it, so he handed it to Faye Dunaway and said, "You fixed it."
Solved it wrong,
and she solved it wrong, and then
they went with it.
Yeah, I guess the most surprising thing, I think he may also, I mean, his explanation might be, I didn't know, I was handing it to her to say, look at what is here, this is wrong, and she just glanced and she thought, I think, that he was kidding around and wanted to, give her the honor of announcing it, so she hadn't seen the card, and he didn't tell her, something's wrong with this, because everyone would say, gasp, but I was surprised at how uncomfortable Warren Beatty was. I mean, he's Warren Beatty. He should, at some point, are you not in a position, even at the Oscars, to say, hold on a minute, I know this is unprecedented, I know this is going to ruin the show, but come on, I'm huge.
You're asking a stand-up guy to do improv.
Yeah, I mean,
I
guess.
It doesn't work that way. He's a stand-up guy.
That's really it, but you would just think that he would be like, if anybody can call a halt to the Oscars to say, this has to be fixed, you'd think it was somebody like that. I don't know if that's true anymore in Hollywood.
I'm just thinking of it in terms of comedians.
Yeah, that's really it. They really don't know what else to do.
They're improv training, and they could, okay, I got to change real fast. Yeah. And then you got the people who just do set pieces. You want to look at a comedian, it's Bob Hope. Bob Hope gets writers. He says his line. Don't ask him to do anything but what he does. That's all he does.
That thing had said, Suicide Squad. I guess he would have said it.
Right, Bob Hope meets Robin Williams. I mean, you know what I'm saying here. It just doesn't work. Well, not everybody is capable and able of doing that. Colbert would have taken care of it. He would have handled it.
Yeah, I guess so.
But Warren Beatty, no, he's going to read his set line.
And he said, well, he was smart enough not to do it, and he handed it to her to do it. But even then, he didn't say, no, that's not.
No, let's just double check this. This doesn't seem right. He could have done that. It would have been all right.
Everyone would have thought he was kidding, and they would have rolled with it for me. It was very weird. Okay, anyway.
Enough of that. Let's talk about the world ending.
Just kidding. Donald Trump's not president. Whatever.
Right. Oscars over. Done. Brought to you by Samsung.
Yeah, explosion.
Everything's on fire, so let's...
So what else is on fire?
Good entree into politics.
Sure.
All right, so listen, I got this one piece here. The effects of different survey methodologies in houses on Donald Trump approval ratings. Kind of interesting. I sent you a picture about it. I think it's like one of the top pictures right after where it says Monday on your feed. And for those of you listening at home, I will send David a Skype list of what I'm going to talk about or what I think I might talk about because sometimes it's with visuals, and this one is. All
right, so there's a picture too. I got the article.
Second one down. First one down is the article. Second one down is the actual picture.
Is the picture how to pronounce the name on the first one? Is it Agajanian?
Go right to the picture. I was going to just quickly elide and go around that and ask Price, Waterhouse how to announce that. Give me the right card.
Is Cooper still in it, or is he out?
I don't know.
Okay.
So here's the thing. If you look at various pollster house effects on Donald Trump's net approval rating.
I see.
You find that Gallup is right about the middle.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the one I'm going to follow for mostly. And you have things that give maybe Trump a little bit worse rating, like PPP.
Yes.
And you have things that give Trump a much better rating, like Rasmussen. A lot of it has to do with whether they're looking at likely voters like Rasmussen or all voters or whether they're online or not online.
I'm surprised to see Quinnipiac there on the.
Yeah, Quinnipiac is the second least favorable to Trump, PPP being the least favorable. And Pew and NBC SurveyMonkey are kind of in there, and HuffPost YouGov. And then on the favorable to Trump, Ipsos, Reuters, McClatchy, Marist, CBS, YouGov, Economist. And then you start to get into the really favoring Trumps, like Politico Morning Consult. Keep that in mind. And then, of course, the ones you'd expect, ARG, IBD Tip, Fox, Rasmussen. Those from the election are going to be like that. But there is a range, and the range is wide. And it's just useful to keep in mind. And in that sense, Gallup's right in the middle and a perfectly reasonable one to use. And since they do it every day, that's worth looking at.
All right. I think so. And it's a nice chart. It balances nicely. So that means both sides and everything's right with the world.
Right, exactly. So the Gallup-Trump job approval these days is his approval is 41, and his disapproval is 54 as of yesterday's. Looks like. Excuse me, this is not right. This is his. I'm looking here, and now they have it from the 25th. Yeah, I guess that is right. Today's the 27th. So he had a bit of a rebound, but back to where he was before. He's basically hanging at 41%, which is awful. And his disapproval's up at 54%, which is awful. And all the people that have made the point, missing the point while making the point, that it is what it is because his own supporters continue to support him, miss the fact that that group of supporters who support him is getting smaller, not growing. And so the usual honeymoon period that one would get isn't there. So we're already a third of the way through the 100 days, and he's made a hash of everything.
Yes.
So, that's just worthwhile to point out. And no, we're not cherry picking by picking Gallup. In fact, we're picking something right in the middle with Gallup. Okay. So here's some interesting things. This is a very, very short tweet storm I did the other day between last show and now. What's going on here? And it's this. There's two disturbing threads today in politics. There's the reports of the cover-up effort from the White House that make Russia connections smell rotten to the core, and you can look at it in a number of ways. For example, the co-opting of the Intel Committee, Senate and House, Richard Burr, and the guy whose name I forget that's running the House Intel Committee.
Kevin Nunes.
Nunes, who wants neither one of them want anything to do with any investigations.
Yeah.
Right? The other's the shooting of an Indian American by a hater in Kansas.
Yes.
Which really still needs to be explored a little bit more.
All right.
Because the Indian American who shot is getting huge play in India.
Well, yes.
It's like a big deal. And one of the things that people are noticing is that American tourism is down like by 9%. People don't want to come here.
Yes, a good point. Lots of money to be lost this way.
Which will affect, among other things, the hotel industry.
Yes, and there's a guy in that industry.
Who cares about it?
Well.
So the concern is real. And in fact, the New York police link hate crime surge to the presidential campaign. And I think that is a legitimate and real concern to have. And the core issue here is the chaos in the White House. And I say to the press, normalizing it is a grave mistake. And you've got to decide what red line you have before you say, okay, we're not going to put up with this. And also a reminder that a quarter of the country will support Trump no matter what. They did when Nixon resigned. Don't focus on them. Focus on the rest of us. We still matter, and we outnumber them, 3-1.
Okay.
So, just that. What else do we have here? This is a great chart. I think now this is at the bottom.
Okay.
The bottom of your Skype feed. And it's the second last thing there.
Let's go. Okay.
This thing I just continued. I listed some because you were in advertising once, and this is a list of all the brands that are behind the scenes at the Oscar, and I thought you might find that interesting. But
yes.
right above that is a piece from The Upshot.
Okay.
Hey, have you subscribed to the New York Times yet?
I have. I did it.
You can read these things.
I know people are not loving the New York Times necessarily, but I depend on them, and though we have our issues, I use an awful lot of their work, and it's not fair.
Yeah. Did you see their ad during the Oscars?
I didn't. But I heard that Donald Trump complained about it.
He did,
something.
Which alone makes it worth seeing. What it is simply black print on a white screen.
Yes.
Giving two sides of each controversy. The issue is Russia. The issue is the leaks. And they just flash them faster and faster and faster, and then just make the point that the truth is hard to know. It's important to search for the truth in the New York Times.
Okay.
So it's really well done. My wife found it just a bit busy. I thought it was fantastic. I really enjoyed seeing it live when they flashed it up on the screen. And today, the New York Times in The Upshot has this chart, and it's a grid.
Okay.
Okay. And on the left side of the grid is normal, and on the right side of the grid is abnormal. At the top of the grid is important, and at the bottom of the grid is unimportant. So, for example, if you're in the lower left-hand corner, normal and not important.
Okay.
The only event that the Trump administration of note has done that's normal and not important is firing Sally Yates.
Yes.
You're supposed to. I mean, if you're not going to act the way I want you to, I'm going to fire you. Everybody knew that. That's normal. It wouldn't have been a big deal. It would have been a big deal because of why, but, that's not an abnormal act.
Ordinarily, they'll be replaced.
Yeah, and they'll be replaced by somebody else.
Even if they do a great job. Right. Okay, I see how they mean that.
All right. And abnormal and not important.
Abnormal, not important. Okay.
Yeah. The one thing that's there is Kellyanne Conway's promotion of Ivanka Trump's brand in a Fox News interview. That's like totally weird. Who cares? It's not going to affect the democracy.
I'll buy that. It's not that far down into the not important.
Correct. It's not only at the bottom of not important,
but it's there. Okay, so
but compared to everything else, I
think that's probably
really abnormal.
Correct.
Absurdly abnormal. You're not supposed to do that. But it's not going to affect. It's not going to get us into a nuclear war.
No. Unless Ivanka is, well, okay.
So what's normal and important? The Gorsuch nomination. Very important, but completely normal. You expect Trump being the winner, and he's a Republican, he's going to, try to appoint a conservative.
Okay.
Abandoning the TPP partnership, a little bit less abnormal. Yeah, he's a Republican, but he said he was going to do it.
I guess so, yes.
Cabinet members, he picked who you thought he was going to pick.
Right.
And he said, and this is very important, but not that abnormal, he said he was going to do something about immigration, so now he's got these immigration raids and roundups.
Yes.
That's not as routine as a Gorsuch nomination, but
no.
It's not like outrageous.
Each quadrant has quadrants, too, so they did a very careful job in describing
Very careful job
things.
Here. And those four things, the Gorsuch nomination, immigration, choices of cabinet members, abandoning TPP, they're all important, but there's only four of them. And there's only one, like, don't even pay attention, Sally Yates, and there's only one, it's weird, but whatever, Kellyanne Conway.
Yeah.
Just about everything else falls into the abnormal and important category. That's what's so interesting about this. It's not the individual, this one or that one. It's that you now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14 things that fit into the abnormal and important category.
Yeah.
That's remarkable.
Yeah. Well, you just remarked on it.
Yeah, I mean the one that's the most abnormal and most important maybe is the use of alternative facts and fake news. Immigration ban, these are the important things.
Yes.
Conflicts of interest, false claims about voter fraud, tweeting about foreign affairs, publicly criticizing federal judges, Bannon on the NSC. I would have raised that to way more important than they did. They don't get it. They're still not ready to see him as a white nationalist trying to blow up the country. They should. He's a chaos agent.
It's in the top
I see it.
half
They don't.
of it, but...
I would have moved him higher.
Okay.
Flynn in Russia. Executive order for a border wall with Mexico, accepting call from the Taiwanese president and upsetting the Chinese. Characterization of media's enemies. National security meeting in public at Mar-a-Lago. Informal discussions with foreign governments before inauguration with no briefing. They didn't leave out the fact that he doesn't have a secure phone. And then right on the borderline of incredibly weird, but who knows how important it is potentially alienating Australia. It's pretty funny when you look at it.
That it exists as an issue.
It exists at all is amazing. That any of these exist at all.
Yeah.
Anything on the abnormal side. And then you want to look at it the other way. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 normal things and maybe 15 abnormal things. And that's about right. 3 to 1, ratio, pretty much.
Okay, I'll buy that. It's a pretty well done chart. You quibble with the placement of a couple of things, but like I said, they were very careful.
But they belong in the right quadrants.
Yeah, they're not just listed in there. You can see they actually kind of quantify it, and you might bump them one way or another, but where do you put...
Grids are a tool that really help you place things in context. They're used in other areas, and this is really a useful one, I think.
I would put down there in Kellyanne Conway territory, Trump went out to dinner over the weekend at his own hotel, and he had a well-done steak, and he eats it with ketchup.
Yes.
That's abnormal.
It is.
But it's not important.
Somebody actually dug up an old ad for Trump steaks, which is a beautiful filet, which is medium with pink in the middle.
Yes.
And no ketchup.
Right. That's the way
he doesn't eat it the way
Americans
he advertised. But then again, nothing about Trump is the way it's advertised.
That's probably true. It's a child's way of eating things. But okay.
Well, he also eats pizza weird, nice.
Yes, that's true. Knife and fork.
Also Mexican food.
Yes, taco bowls, right?
So it's all of a piece.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I don't really know why you would ruin a steak like that, but That's him. He does it. He never really grew up. And if you don't like steak, don't get it. I mean, I don't.
Hey, you want to hear something that's in the abnormal?
Arugula.
But important?
That's not important. Sorry. Yes?
I'm going to read you a quote, and you have to guess who said it.
This is okay.
You ready? Power can be very addictive and can be corrosive, and it's important for the media to hold people to account. Said this morning on NBC.
That sounds like a normal quote.
Yeah?
But it's abnormal who said it?
Yeah?
Newt Gingrich.
George W. Bush.
He said that.
Yeah.
He, like, by himself?
Gotcha.
Huh. That's abnormal that he was able to say all those things.
Yeah. So
That's
here's
coherent.
the former president saying power can be addictive and it's corrosive and it's important for the media to hold people to account. Which people do you think he's referring to, George W. Bush, when he says it this morning?
Normally, Democrats.
Oh,
But
well,
no,
you know, it's whoever's in the
they're
White
not
House.
in power, so it can't be them. Okay. So he says that about Trump, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Well, is he addicted to power by any chance? I don't know. I mean, not Trump. He is, I know. But, I mean, George W. Bush gave it up pretty easy. He was happy.
Right.
Huh.
Right.
Well, that's interesting and coherent, and he's not really known for that. But I guess by comparison, he's terrifically well-spoken versus Trump. But
Well,
he
I
was
just think it's remarkable that he
famously
said
not.
it. I'm just saying.
Yes. Well,
Okay.
he practiced it, I guess, and he did a good job.
Right. Now, here's a good one. I thought you would enjoy this. I know I've enjoyed this because I have been clamoring for this. I get so annoyed with the media when they don't do it. I even think we talked about it on the show last week. All right. Let me read you the headline. It's by Jenna Johnson, who, if I'm not mistaken, was originally from the Des Moines Register, Jenna Johnson.
Oh, I don't know. That's a good
Before she
call.
joined the
No
Washington
idea.
Post.
Okay.
I have to check. But here's the title. These Iowans voted for Trump. Many of them are already disappointed. You know how annoyed I was that they always find Trump voters who haven't changed their minds?
Yes.
Well, these are the ones that have.
All right. Luckily, we let them go first.
Yeah, I mean, they're interesting. But
First in the nation to change their minds as well.
yeah.
That's great. Okay.
Let's see. I'm going
New
to...
Hampshire is changing their license with it. Live free and die. They're changing their minds as well.
That is a great idea.
And it
These
seems
Iowans
to happen
voted
so
for Trump.
often.
Many of them are already disappointed. Let's read what they say. Tom Godad, a union electrician who's always voted for Democrats, cast his ballot for Donald Trump last year as the lesser of two evils compared to Hillary Clinton.
Wow.
So the ability to make Hillary Clinton so evil that she was worse than Trump is pretty remarkable, and I blame the media for that. And no, you don't get off the
live
hook.
electricity, everybody. Okay.
He's already embarrassed about it, a little embarrassed. There's a lot that Godot likes about Trump, especially his pledge to make the country great again by ignoring lobbyists, challenging both political parties, and increasing the number of good-paying jobs.
I like great.
Me, if I were running, David, I would promise more services and less taxes.
Yes.
And then
That'll
I'd
be-
win, right? Because, like, who cares? That's step 10, and who cares about 2 through 9?
Right.
But Godot was surprised by the utter chaos. Chaos! Oh, look at that word. I love when I see chaos there. But Godot was surprised by the utter chaos that came in with the president's first month. We weren't surprised, were we? But he was.
Him.
He said it often felt like Trump and his staff were impulsively firing off executive orders instead of really thinking things through. Can you imagine? I didn't think he would come in blazing like he has, said Godot 39, who has 3 kids and works at the same aluminum rolling plant where his father worked. It seems almost like a dictatorship at times. He's got a lot of controversial stuff going on, and rather than thinking it through, I'm afraid that he's jumping into the frying pan with both feet. But this guy voted for him.
Jumping into the front.
Frying pan with both feet.
Okay. He's not an English teacher.
No,
He's an electrician.
right.
Fair enough. The frying
Of the
pan
6
is
swing
the
states
same.
that were key to Trump's unexpected win in November, and yes, it was unexpected, his margin of victory was the highest in Iowa, where he beat Clinton by 9 points. But right now, only 42% of Iowans approve of the job he's doing. 49% disapprove, according to the DMR Bloomberg, a Mediacom Iowa poll this month.
Okay.
So in eastern Iowa, where they are, it's in the low 40s. It's highest in northwest Iowa, where it's 55. And northwest, I always wonder where the media markets are for that.
Quadrants of Iowa.
Yeah, got to divide everything into a quadrant today. Anyway, they went and spoke to a whole bunch of different people, And he wishes he could tell the president, focus on us and our country and our issues here. The reporter makes the point that he represents a lot of people they spoke to along the way. Mm-hmm. They can find supporters. One guy describes himself as a progressive Republican who falls asleep watching Fox News each night. Scratch your head and say, I don't think so. You may think of yourself as Republican, but you just don't get how conservative you are.
Yeah, progressive. Huh. Well, okay.
Right? Here's another. Others in the bar insist that Trump supports unions. A union guy doesn't think so. Nope, he's completely against them. Mm-hmm. He and his dad farm about 500 acres of soybeans and corn, so maybe he's not a union guy. But he's also worried about the president's promise to renegotiate NAFTA, which could hurt farmers. He's really hurting us, even though everybody around here is conservative, Sherman says, thumping his bottle of Budweiser on the table to emphasize some of his points.
Don't do that.
He doesn't drink Labatt's. He doesn't drink, Urquell. He doesn't drink Spaten. He drinks Budweiser.
Spaten, holy cow. Okay.
I mean, you're going to get a good beer. Have a good beer.
Yeah.
When he cut off trade, that cuts off everything. Where do our crops go? They don't stay here. But still, he likes much of what Trump is doing and wishes protesters would give him a break. This is the part you scratch your head and say, what are you talking about? You hate everything he's doing, but they wish the protesters would give him a break.
I wish they would. And I wish they'd eat my soybeans as well.
Right.
And they are. But.
So, it's fascinating. And these are what you might call the conditionals. I hate to say it, but I voted for Hillary, said Dave Drew, 71, longtime Democrat. I voted against Trump. We didn't have a choice. I didn't think she was the greatest choice. I don't think he was either. Biden would have been my choice. Uh-huh. And there were jokes about Clinton's health. Racial slur was used to describe Middle Easterners. The group mostly agreed that mass deportations would tank the state's economy, but they wondered why immigrants didn't learn English before coming to the U.S. Actually, most of them, many of them know English quite well. They may have an accent, but they may well write better than the guy up there who jumped 2 feet into the frying pan.
Yeah, well, that's possible.
Right. UY73 praised Latinos for having a strong work ethic, taking low-paying factory and meatpacking plant jobs that most Iowans don't want, especially black Iowans whom he accused of being lazy. So this is great.
Well,
he's being racist while he's trying to show how enlightened he is.
Okay.
Told 2 stereotype-filled stories to back up his claim. The thing is, I'm not cutting him slack and saying it's okay to be like that. But having grown up with folks like that, I totally understand. It's so integrated into who you are that you don't even see that you're doing it yourself.
I could see that.
So, would I take his vote if he voted for Clinton? Yeah. Would I consider him to be, not the best, nicest person in the world? Yeah. Would I have to keep an eye on him? Yeah. Would I want him to set my agenda, let's say, on Black Lives Matter? No.
No.
But, people are complicated.
No!
Right. Exactly. I have all kinds of... I got all my sound effects. I keep forgetting about them.
Oh, was that you?
Yes.
No!
See? I had a yacht, and I should have answered your question.
That guy, I didn't know.
Yeah, do I agree with his racism?
No!
Do I understand what he's talking about?
Yeah.
Not really.
Got it. Anyway, I thought it was an interesting read.
That was a goat, by the way.
Here's an Andy Borowitz article. And the best thing about Andy Borowitz, remember, is just read the headline.
Okay.
And that's fun.
All right. Borowitz.
Here's the headline. Republicans accuse voters of using town halls to express themselves.
that is a Borowitz headline.
Yeah. I mean, his headlines are fantastic. The story, not so much. But the headlines are always great, and I love that one.
Okay.
Here is Paul Krugman using their uses of outrage and basically making the point that it's perfectly okay to be outraged. My argument is be outraged about Trump and the White House and the people in the White House and the cabinet. And by the way, you can extend that and include it to be Congress.
Oh, yes, if you like.
You got plenty of time to be outraged, and you can leave the voters out of it.
All right.
Then we have White House. Too early to say whether a special prosecutor should look into apparent election meddling by Russia. And this was really revealing. This is the Huckabee scion, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who is the deputy press secretary and does weekends, I suppose.
Is she a Huckabee?
Yeah,
like the
daughter?
Huh.
Pretty sure. I think she was his campaign manager when he was running.
Really? Oh, well, horrible.
People can check me. That's what's good about the radio and Twitter. People will check me if I'm wrong.
Yes, right. True.
Assessment by Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the principal White House deputy press secretary, comes as a growing number of Democrats are calling for Sessions, who was a key figure in Trump's campaign, to step aside as the FBI and Justice Department probe what happened. And interestingly, I don't know if this happened in time for the show on Friday for you. On Friday, a leading Republican, Representative Darrell Issa of California, echoed that view, saying a special prosecutor would be appropriate.
I believe that happened either after the show or too late for me to notice.
Oh, yeah. It was on Friday, and then Sunday, Sanders, that is to say the Sarah Huckabee Sanders, not Bernie, said congressional committees looking into Russian activity should be allowed to do their work first. Okay? And then she said, and this is the part that was just fascinating here, Sanders also said that the investigations would find no efforts by the Trump campaign to collude with Russians, and suggested the focus on Russia was being driven by Democrats still upset by the election result. The bigger thing here, she said, and I just love this quote. This is like a window into how Trump thinks. The bigger thing here is if Democrats want to continue to relive their loss every single day by doing an investigation or review after review that's fine by us, we know why we won. It's because we had the better candidate with the better message. They didn't campaign in the right places. They didn't have a good candidate. If they want to continue to relive that loss every single day, we welcome that. And to me, basically what she's saying is, look, on the one hand, we're not buying this Russia stuff because we know it's there and we're not going to let you look. But on the other hand, let's be clear. F you, we won. And if you want to ask us about our defense of Russia, F you, we won. And if you want to ask us about our governance strategy, F you, we won. And if you don't like what we're doing with immigration, F you, we won. And if you don't like what we're doing with fake news and attacking the media, F you, we won. It's basically the only coherent strategy they have amidst the chaos. And I think it's fascinating that somebody would actually come out and say this. What's the election got to do with anything in terms of whether or not he colluded with Russia and is colluding now and is, perhaps, we don't know, but let's see where this investigation goes. Maybe he did a whole bunch of stuff that really wasn't appropriate, because we know through our intelligence committees and other leaks that Russia was in fact trying to influence the election. How deeply? With whom? How did that work? And if the only answer to that is F you, we won, fine. And at the same time, Trump remains totally fixated on the fact that people aren't giving him credit enough for winning because he's such a wonderful person. Why doesn't everybody agree with him on that? And so he keeps having to go back to, but I won. You can't, but I won. Let me talk about how many electoral votes I got. Let me talk about how wonderful the election was. Oh, Australia guy, you want to talk about nuclear weapons and maybe the fact that China's attacking Japan right now? Let me tell you about the electoral votes I got.
Yes.
And of course, part of the problem is America needs somebody to run it, not the way he's doing it, but actually to manage, those kinds of crises and so on and so forth. So, it's good that General McMaster is in that position, but he's still not the president. And there were stories out over the weekend that suggest that he doesn't have walk-in privileges to the Oval Office the way, let's say, a Steve Bannon would.
Yes, I did notice that. That seems weird.
It does. But is it any more weird than FU we won? Because that's really what matters.
No. I guess not. I don't know. Normally you would have that, of course, but normally you have a president knows his national security advisor better than he knows this one. I mean,
you would think.
Yeah, although I can understand.
He can use Bannon as a national security advisor, even though that's not the role.
Well, that's true. Did Flynn have walk-in privileges when he was in?
He wasn't there long enough to know.
Yeah, I don't know if we found that out. I mean, I assume you want to limit walk-in privileges to people you know pretty well, but then again,
well, people that could do that, your chief of staff.
Yeah.
And a national security advisor, and maybe one or two other incredibly trusted aides, like a Bannon acting as a Karl Rove, who's a political aide but not on the security. Maybe three people can do that. Yeah. I don't know. I haven't been the president. I really don't know how it works. But it's really a small number of people who have walk-in privileges.
Yes.
But the fact that the national security guy doesn't.
Yeah, that's usually, even if you don't know him
President,
that well.
we have a crisis going on here, and I just want to go through some of the events and bullet point and options we have over the next few minutes. You'll get more details, but just to give you a frame so that you can, look at the incoming in the next hour or so.
Normally, even if they
cancel
don't...
your appointments here, and you need to be in the Situation Room, sir.
Even if they don't have walk-in privileges, you'd trust, okay, if the National Security Advisor shows up and says, I need to see the president, the chief of staff who does will walk in and say, he's here, come with me, or he'll walk in with him. Here, these guys, you could see them saying, well, you can't go. I'll tell them, but you stay here.
Right. All right, I'm going to end this segment today with one thing. I do have the Pundit Roundup with lots of things in there.
Okay.
Including a wonderful piece by LOL GOP Jason Sattler on Time to Talk Trump impeachment. And I thought the right I word is investigate rather than impeachment. But still, there's the Navy SEAL dad who feels that Trump had made up the reasons for the entire raid, that it was a publicity stunt that killed his son, and he's outraged and won't meet with Trump over it.
I heard he wouldn't meet with him. I didn't realize that he thought that the raid was unnecessary.
Yep. And then there's a whole New York Times magazine section that's devoted to labor, which I thought was interesting. Divisions of Labor, New Words, Kinds of Work Require New Ideas, New Ways of Organizing by Barbara Einreich, Future of Not Working by Annie Lowry, Kenya's Doing a Universal Income Experiment, Learning to Love Our Robot Coworkers by Kim Tingley. There's some interesting stuff in there. It's all in the Pundit Roundup if you want to go in depth. Let me finish with this one because I thought it was fascinating, also from the Upshot, Brendan Nyhan. Is the slide into tribal politics inevitable?
Slide?
Yeah. Donald Trump's victory could well push the American party system toward a clash between an overwhelmingly white ethnic party and a cosmopolitan coalition of minority groups and college-educated whites.
Okay.
This is interesting because the reason that Clinton lost and Trump won is because in the end, at the last minute, the college-educated whites, especially the women, deserted her. She made one a majority, but not by what people were expecting. To me, that's Comey, but you could argue that. In any case, after the election, college-educated whites are dropping off Trump, and that's why his ratings are as low as they are. So, despite the unexpected result, Nyhan writes, Mr. Trump lost the popular vote in an election that in some respects closely resembled Obama's victory over Romney in 2012. Ordinary end to an abnormal campaign. Party ID held approximately 90% of Republicans in Trump's camp, but Mr. Trump's campaign may set in motion a process that reorients American politics towards the cosmopolitanism versus nationalism divide that he emphasized, reconfiguring the parties. And once you start that, it's very difficult to stop. So instead of liberal-conservative, it's urban-rural, it's nationalism versus cosmopolitanism. I know what side I'm on. I don't know if this is a good thing or not a good thing. It may, again, emphasize the fact that Democrats win the White House, but not necessarily the State House. So, something to keep an eye on here.
Wow. Okay.
Despite all the attention paid to economic anxiety as the basis for Mr. Trump's appeal, the evidence to date is more consistent with his brand of identity politics being the more important cause of the shift in voting patterns in 2012, although, of course, it's not exclusive. Economic anxiety and group animus may go together. But we've talked about this. We never bought into the economic anxiety BS. That's not what it was.
Yeah. Okay.
That's why lower-income voters voted for Clinton. And Trump's voters were actually higher income than people expected.
Yes.
So it was nationalism, and in some cases, white nationalism. So few Republicans are likely to want to cross Mr. Trump and his energized supporters given the threat of potential primary challenges in 2018. Mr. Trump's success is likely to provoke a response from Democrats that could accelerate this shift. They face an outraged liberal base that is likely to reject conciliatory messages intended to win back votes among the white working class. Does this sound familiar? It's a debate you and I are having over the last month. Except I'm saying that really the message isn't as much toward white working class as it is toward college educated, and at the same time, it has to include as much as possible messages to the white working class to, at best, keep them on the sidelines, even if you don't win them over to your side. The party might instead double down on cosmopolitan appeals to the minority voters and college-educated white voters, who were the main target of Clinton's campaign. It failed in 2016, but the incentive to try again is clear. Democrats came closer to winning several Sunbelt states where minority and college-educated white populations are growing. So they're talking about including Arizona and Georgia in future instead of trying to win back maybe, Iowa and Ohio. Then they did some traditional Midwest. They even mentioned Iowa and Ohio.
Okay.
Good for them. We're on the same wavelength there. A focus on cosmopolitanism might make electoral sense to Democrats given the changing demographics, but it could further weaken their appeal to whites without college degrees, dividing the electorate by race and class even more. So nothing about this is preordained. Maybe Republicans the GOP can steer Trump toward a traditional GOP agenda. I doubt it, but maybe they can. But the effects he could have on America's party system could be far more lasting consequence than almost any policy he might propose. I think it's a fascinating piece of insight, and I think it fits quite well into the stuff that you and I have been talking about these past couple of weeks.
Well, we will see. This will be an interesting week for that development. We'll see what kind of relationship Trump can build with traditional Republicans who occupy Congress.
Yeah, exactly. He had his rally speech. We know what he said. It was very hard-edged at CPAC, and now he's got to talk to Congress tomorrow. Is he just as hard-edged?
I don't know. We've got a couple of pieces about that. It's going to be interesting. No one can guess whether he will replay his greatest hits and stand aloof from Congress, or whether he's going to try to woo them into doing what he wants.
And those are the thoughts I will leave you with, so you can explore it for the rest of the show, or whatever else you want to do, because the fun thing about Kagro in the Morning is Kagro has no idea what's coming next.
That is true. It's like they hand it to me in an envelope.
Exactly. And sometimes it's the right one, and sometimes it's the wrong one. I do my best, but sometimes I screw up.
It's in the article. I have to read it.
Yeah. Take care. And this is Greg Dworkin speaking with my very good friend David Waldman, Kagro in the Morning. You see, we can disagree without being disagreeable. Let that be a lesson to all of you.
That is bull. Get out of here.
And
I said it calmly.
Stop shaking your fist at that cloud. Take care, and I will talk to you Wednesday, tomorrow being my day off.
All righty. Thanks very much, Greg.
All right, take care.
It's a good start. Thank you. You do the same. Let's see. We didn't mention that over the weekend, the Democratic Party organization, the National Democratic Party organization, that would be the Democratic National Committee, has selected a new chair in a closely contested race in which everybody else eventually dropped out. It was Tom Perez versus Keith Ellison, and battle lines were drawn and this and that and the other thing. It was a very close race. Tom Perez is the new chair. Vice chair will be Keith Ellison. And the partisans on either side, here you go, as with most contests in normal times where the contestants are normal people and it's something important at stake, the partisans on either side were initially upset, and some of them will remain upset, but the contestants themselves said, no, we can deal with this. I trust the other person to do well. He is a good Democrat, and I will work with him to try and implement policies that I think make sense, but we're more or less on the same page. There isn't that much difference between us. And also, true to form, the partisans on either side in some cases accepted this and said, yeah, we really should listen to our guy here, or in some cases said, no, that's just what you have to say after a contest like this, and it's just the same old BS, but although it is kind of interesting, but it's just the same old BS that you failed politicians who got us into this mess in the first place always do after a contest like this, and I'm mad that you didn't win because you were not supposed to be one of those regular old politicians, but they actually are. Well, anyway, it's just tough to lose a contest like that, a close one, and it is. It's the expected role of the contestant themselves to make out that it's not a huge deal, and it's the expected role of the partisan supporters to not accept that either immediately or in some cases forever. But at the very least, I mean, the good news, I guess, is that at least being Democrats, they are more believably on the same page on a lot of issues, if not all of them. Very interesting. I'm not sure what position I want to take on that one. I'm one of those people that wasn't particularly moved by that contest. And a lot of people, well, some people took offense at the fact that anybody could not particularly care as between the two of them. I guess I would have, this is one of those stupid things. At the outset, I would have supported either of them. I suppose if I'm a Democratic National Committee member, I would have felt like, no, I have to take responsibility and make a decision here. I can't just say, oh, they both have pluses and minuses, and I didn't do that homework because it's not my job. And I don't know how I would have voted. I guess I would have had to go to the meeting and listen. That would have been tough. Boy, anyway, there's some good pieces out there, though, that aim at reassuring Ellison supporters, and I guess originally supporters of other candidates as well, that Perez is in fact among the most, well, a lot of people opposed him because he was a member of the Obama cabinet and therefore viewed as the establishment candidate. But one of the pieces I at least saw in passing this morning attempted to make the argument that he was the most progressive of the Obama cabinet members, and that he, at the very least, really set the teeth of Republicans on edge. They hated him deeply because he was, the argument goes, the most progressive of the Obama cabinet members. But they would have hated an Obama cabinet member no matter who they were. So I take that with a bit of a grain of salt. Anyway, the news is that it's Perez, and duly noted. I can't tell, and a lot more of you probably followed that contest closer than I did, and you're welcome to make some comment on that as well. And of course, easiest way to do that, easiest way to get my attention during the show, use the KITM hashtag on Twitter and leave it hanging out there. We'll take a look at it and include it in the show. Let's see, what did I put aside? Let's go to my usual sources. Twitter, Pocket, things that people sent to me using the hashtag, and stuff that's happening right now that distracts me like a squirrel. By the way, the shade is down today. The experiment has come to a conclusion. We've gotten our pictures of the birds, and we no longer need to have that bird feeder up there and distracting me. And the squirrels did finally get it yesterday, and during the day at that. They're usually not that bold during the day. But they did. They took a flying leap at it, apparently, tackled it, pulled it off the strings, and went smashing down the stairs with it and spilled all the seeds out. So they ultimately had the victory, but we'll try and rig it up again, and this time we'll just put it out there, let the birds eat, and I won't even bother them when they do, and it won't get distracted anymore either. We have all this seed. We might as well get rid of it and not bother them when they're eating. Okay, so let's see. What do we put in Pocket? Let's start there. I'll scroll a little bit because I had some good things, I'm sure, at the beginning of the weekend, and they got piled up on today's pile. Let's see. One, there was the piece by The Hill that I mentioned having taken a look at. It's called Trump Takes the Fight to Congress. It does note that he will be addressing the joint session tomorrow and talks to some anonymous sources. Some anonymous, some not so anonymous, even though everybody said we should stop talking to anonymous sources over in the White House, even though they love anonymous sources. So just some speculation on either side as to whether Trump will stand aloof and replay his greatest hits. Will he come to Congress and tell them how many electoral votes he got and what a huge victory he had, and et cetera, et cetera? I mean, no audience would already know that better and be less interested in it. But as some of these other people close to Trump who are quoted in the story pointed out, his audience, he always thinks of his audience as the American people, not even when he's addressing a joint session of Congress, not really them so much as the viewers. He plays to the TV audience, and they might not want him to strike a conciliatory tone and talk about working with the Republican establishment in D.C. Let's see. More news over the weekend and breaking right now. More of the same, essentially, without any formal, really strong condemnation from the White House. Not that I know one way or the other whether that would put a stop to any of this, but more vandalism of Jewish cemeteries over the weekend, this time in the Philadelphia area. And currently, the Asheville, North Carolina Jewish Community Center just evacuated following a bomb threat. Those inside have been moved to a nearby church for safety. I guess that's the only place you can go these days and count on safety if it's going to have a religious theme to it wherever you go. Make sure it's the right religion here in America. No one would bomb a church except for, of course, the guy who, in fact, did go in and try to kill everybody at a church. But other than that, how was your day? All right. Other stories of note. Here's an interesting thing. This was offered up in a tweet. I should take a look at how long this thing is. It was offered up with the note of, yes, you really should, perhaps despite the headline, perhaps because of the headline, read the whole thing. And when people say read the whole thing, sometimes that means it's long, and they're afraid you won't read it because it's got a lot of words in it, and you know how people are with words. This doesn't look to be that long. But what a title, right? Let's try this. How internet porn caused the rise of Donald Trump. That should be interesting. Maybe it's not as difficult to imagine as we once thought, given how much time we've spent reading other people's work on the connection between, say, Gamergate and MRA folks and various stripes of misogyny, and I guess that's not so far removed from some strains of internet pornography either, and I wonder whether that's the connection or is it something considerably more surprising? I don't know. Let's go find out. Why not? This is in The Guardian, interestingly enough. And where's the byline? Is it Dean Burnett? Is that right? Okay. Yeah. Dean Burnett is our writer. How internet porn caused the rise of Donald Trump. Unfortunately, the links between online porn and Donald Trump's successful campaign to become U.S. president are easy to see. That would be unfortunate in many ways. Okay. The piece is illustrated by a picture of a photo of a shouting Donald Trump in front of an NBC logo. I guess it's sort of for a promotion for The Apprentice, probably, and captioned, not the most arousing photo ever, admittedly, but if you were Googling Trump porn, you deserve everything you get. That's a caption for you. Donald Trump, the article tells us, is President of the United States. No matter how many times it's said, to many it still sounds surreal given our understanding of how the world is meant to work. It's like the Oscars. Countless theories have been put forward to explain this shocking turn of events that took all seasoned pundits by surprise. It was because the Democrats embraced neoliberalism, because of misogyny, both outright and internalized, because of low Democrat turnout, which they write in lowercase, interestingly, and use Democrat. But okay, because of media bias, because of deeply embedded racism, and many more factors. But what if Donald Trump's win is thanks to a far more unlikely but omnipresent factor? Something that's inescapable in today's society but often deliberately overlooked in political debates due to its very nature. Internet porn. Is that far-fetched? Tell me more, and I will tell you. Here's the first section here. Internet porn gives a skewed view of the world. Well, I imagine it probably would. If it's a view of the world in which most people are naked all the time. I mean, that's not been my experience, but your results may vary. I don't know. And the alt-right being a sex cult and Trump world likewise, I suppose it's entirely possible. Let's see. Humans learn by observing others, it says. That's probably true. Our brains rely on the actions of other humans to supply much of the information on how the world works, rather than have us have to do everything firsthand. And one thing porn definitely involves, oh boy, is other humans. Okay, indisputably true. It does say unless you have more dubious / illegal inclinations. And I guess that must be acknowledged. However, few would argue that most porn presents a realistic portrayal of human behavior. Okay. People seldom offer to pay for their pizza delivery or plumbing service with intimate physical acts. This seems true. Previously, heterosexual women won't suddenly opt to have sex with each other purely because they can. But pornography often suggests otherwise. We'd typically not be fooled by such contrived setups, but sex affects our brain on multiple levels, often clouding our rational thinking and forming weird associations. That likewise seems true. Essentially, constant exposure to internet porn could distort our understanding of how the world works and how we should behave. Like, well, for one thing, don't constantly look at internet porn. But I guess that's not worth telling anybody. Given that most pornography is aimed at men and much of it has questionable ethical practices, this would have unpleasant results. It could give enthusiastic viewers the idea that women are subservient and deserve to be, even enjoy being, degraded verbally and physically. Contrastingly, men who inflict this behavior on women are rewarded with sex and deference. Now we're getting somewhere. Donald Trump won the election with the support of a majority of men against a highly qualified female opponent, despite his reported behavior, or because of it. Internet porn makes us think gratification is easy. That comes up next. Internet porn is easy to get. It's often free. A big success for our model here, right? It's often free and available at the touch of a button. An actual button. Something so fundamental, that is to say sexual stimulation, being so easy to obtain would set a bad precedent. Whereas most things we need or want require some considerable effort to obtain, internet porn shows that this doesn't have to be the case. The human brain takes the easy option where possible. It only has so many resources to dedicate to everything, so simple answers are often preferred to complex ones. And internet porn supplies constant examples that powerful drives and needs can be satisfied with ease and simple solutions. Ergo, Donald Trump's questionable claims about ending trade deals, and evicting all illegal immigrants, etc., don't seem so far-fetched and unworkable to many voters who care about such things, so why not vote for him? This does seem a bit of at least a bit of a, let's say they went from step 2 to step 8. This is interesting. But I can fill in the blanks. I get you. I don't know if I'm convinced, but okay. Internet porn, it says, makes us more gullible. That's the next section. Linked to how it creates a skewed view of the world. Internet porn could also make us more susceptible to fake news. Ridiculous setups, contrived scenarios, baffling claims. These are all common in internet porn, but are also associated with very real rewards of arousal and gratification. You expose yourself to anything for long enough, I see. Our brains will become desensitized, habituated to it, so it really doesn't register with us anymore. This has got so many mixed metaphors in here. I'm confused. It's like, are you trying to say, well, if you expose yourself to something or someone for long enough, eventually they'll decide to have sex with you? No, that's not. Oh, I see what you mean. Okay. Expose yourself in the more, okay. Constantly seeing people behave in very intimate ways while a camera is trained on them that they never acknowledge is easy to see how that may make us more susceptible to staged events, cynically created to get attention and online traffic. If porn has worn away our ability to spot and dismiss unlikely claims and scenarios, then it has been of great help to Donald Trump and his methods. This is really not making it for me, but okay, it's very interesting. I get the idea, and it's not to be dismissed entirely, but I guess the answer is if there was more porn that broke the fourth wall, then Hillary Clinton would be president. But isn't this claim ridiculous? Okay, that's the next section. This is the section for me. Of course it is. No part of this argument stands up to scrutiny. Really? That's a buried lead. It's just a smattering of basic neuroscience combined with a very simplistic and somewhat harsh, maybe, portrayal of pornography. People's sexual leanings and behavior varies tremendously, as does porn, given how much of it there is. Internet porn was no less common during the Obama years, and it's just as accessible in places like Canada and Germany, which seem to be avoiding the embracing ridiculous despots trend thus far. Hold on, Germany is still pending. Involving a few fundamental neurological processes does not confirm that watching porn causes you to be a gullible sexist, any more than playing Grand Theft Auto automatically makes you a sociopathic serial killer, despite what some media may seem to think. People doing things without acknowledging the camera isn't exactly exclusive to porn. It practically describes all TV shows. Okay, so is this the surprise? We were just kidding. And if you believed it, then you watch too much porn, I think is what they're trying to tell you. This article is just an example of how easy okay. Oh, thank God I was so skeptical about this. This is good. I feel better about this now. This article is just an example of how easy it is. Now I see why they said read the whole thing. I'm so slow. The article is just an example of how easy it is to create a valid-sounding theory by forming a conclusion and reverse engineering it. This is clever. Cherry-picking things that back it up from the vast amount of data available. I cynically picked porn and Trump because those are two extremely popular search terms right now, and probably always. So people are more likely to read it, but it could have been anything. How renewable energy led to Labour's Copeland by-election defeat. How feminism, remember, it's the Guardian, it's a British paper. How feminism caused the Oscars announcement chaos. How Netflix leads to Brexit. They even sound similar. There are many articles, blogs, opinion pieces, Twitter threads, etc. flying around lately which confidently explain major and complicated events in straightforward and compelling ways, and they're often shared readily by those who agree with their conclusion. But over a decade in neuroscience makes one extremely wary of such an approach. It's just too like the countless claims about how a certain specific bit of the brain is responsible for some incredibly abstract and complex phenomenon. For example, religious experiences and Apple fandom. When the truth is, it's actually many different regions working together in baffling and convoluted ways. As with the brain, so it is with society. Millions of people spread over thousands of square miles, existing in countless different environments and situations, some with pickup trucks, some without, I'll add. The idea that one specific and graspable factor explains their behavior en masse is something of a stretch, like pickup trucks, I would add. It's understandable why people want there to be one. The human brain really doesn't like uncertainty, especially regarding things that may affect the individual concerned. So, we seek out and gravitate towards explanations for complex, worrying events, and the simpler the better. But this doesn't mean they're right, no matter how much sense they make in isolation. No doubt there's some merit to them, some validity, and as there is with the porn Trump theory, but it's just one element of among countless others. It's not fake news, it's more selective news, focusing on the things that back up your existing thoughts and views. But there's some overlap between the two. It's good to want a simple explanation for unpleasant events, but it's important to be aware that there may be no simple, comprehensive one to be had. So trying to find it can be counterproductive. It's fine to argue about exactly why the ship hit the iceberg, as long as you start bailing at some point. There you go. Interesting piece. Wow. Dean Burnett's book, it notes here at the bottom, is The Idiot Brain. So that's a book we should probably all get. Includes many more cop-outs from attempts to explain complicated issues. So it's out there and available, and you can follow the links and pick up such a book if you're interested. That was fascinating, right? I'm glad I did read the whole thing, and I was admonished to do so. It's a good thing I didn't give up until sometime before the end there. Okay, a good trick. We should have saved that one for April Fool's Day or something like that. All right. Let's see, other pocket news. Let's see. I will note for the record, without diving into them, but just so you're aware of the fact that it exists, Congress, of course, back in town this week after last week's recess, during which they mostly hid from their constituents, as you know. But that will also mean that the Senate will be back in town to begin the process of, continue the process of confirming cabinet nominees and other Senate-approved positions, and there really haven't been that many nominated just yet, but we're still in the middle of the parade of cabinet nominees. One of the last ones that they took care of before departing for the recess last week was Scott Pruitt at EPA, and you may recall that he was approved just hours after a court in Oklahoma ordered the release of his emails sent while he was Attorney General, and everybody was upset that we were once again being forced to vote on a cabinet nominee with something considerably less than a thorough vetting. And I guess it should be pointed out that this is a continuing problem for the still young Trump administration. Even though he's the oldest president, he's got a young administration. You see, it's not that the people in it are young; it's just it's only been around for 30-something days. And it should be noted, as it has been by many folks online and on Twitter. In particular, I have in front of me Kyle Griffin's note that we have, of course, the National Security Advisor, Mike Flynn, who resigned. The proposed or the nominated Secretary of the Army has withdrawn. And just yesterday, the proposed Secretary of the Navy has withdrawn from consideration as well. In between Flynn and McMaster, there were two possible replacements named for National Security Advisor, and neither of them would take the job. And then, of course, there was the story last week of the 6 White House aides who failed to pass their security screening and were escorted from the building and lost their jobs. That's a lot of people bounced out for an administration that was so interested in extreme vetting for immigrants. They haven't been able to adequately vet their own people, and it's not like they've done such a high volume trade in nominations either. They're way, 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 way behind on that, and even the ones that they've managed to get done keep getting bounced from consideration. So I think that's kind of interesting. This one, Pruitt, of course, has made it through, and now we're left after the fact to comb through the emails and see whether any of them rise to the level of, oh my God, we have to do something about it and impeach this guy. Not that that would be possible even if you found the worst thing in the world. But Mother Jones has combed through the first 1,000 or so, or a couple thousand that have hit the internet. That's the title of their piece. Thousands of Scott Pruitt's emails just hit the internet. Here are the wildest, scariest bits. What are they? I don't know. Should we go through them? Probably not at this point, but I'll make you aware of the fact that they're out there. I don't know of what use they're going to be. It'll just make you bitter and make you complain about a guy that you're not able to remove from office at the moment. But that doesn't mean you won't eventually get around to it or we won't discover something important about it. It's just that we only have 2 hours, and with all those emails out there, I'm sure there's something horrible. You should take a look at them in your own time. So will I. And if they really rise to the level of dangerously egregious, we will no doubt be discussing them on the show. Let's see. There is a more traditional view of from the Hill of who is Alexander Acosta, which includes the important fact that that first name, for which he was just using the initial R, Alexander Acosta, is Renee. So there you go. That's in Trump land. You can't go around calling yourself Renee. If you're a man, you have to call yourself R. Alexander Acosta, which by all accounts he did even before the Trump administration. But anyway, we learned last week and, at some point last week, he was involved in both the slap on the wrist for Jeffrey, was it Epstein? The weirdo billionaire pedophile who ended up only getting a couple of months in jail, even though he was trafficking in young girls and allegedly, according to some, involving Donald Trump in that situation. And although he was also alleged to have been a friend of and spent lots of time with Bill Clinton, I don't know that anybody ever alleged that Bill Clinton indulged in that, although there are certainly people who would say, gosh, it'd be hard to believe that he would just be palling around with a guy like that and not indulge, but I don't think anybody's made that allegation just yet, except darkly hinting at it from the Republican side. So that's out there. The Hill has a more traditional look at him, but he also was involved in the U.S. Attorney's scandal back in the Bush administration. He's been around. The Hill has a more traditional look at who he is and what role he has played, including 3 different roles in the George W. Bush administration. It says 3 different presidentially appointed Senate-confirmed positions from 2002 to 2009. Just by way of catching up on that, since he'll shortly be up for consideration in the Senate as well, although I don't see him on the calendar just yet. He served as an NLRB, National Labor Relations Board member, participating in more than 125 opinions. While serving on the NLRB, Acosta took a primarily conservative approach, should surprise no one, that favored employers. In a decision on a Walmart case in 2003, Acosta participated in a majority opinion ruling that the retail giant did not illegally solicit and resolve employee grievances in an effort to dissuade workers from unionizing. Might be an important thing now, given Tom Perez at the head of the Democratic National Committee. We'll see. Let's see. The majority reasoned that Walmart did not violate the NLRA, the National Labor Relations Act, because it continued an established practice of periodically meeting with workers in an effort to listen to their concerns. Gee whiz. In another pro-employer decision in 2003, this time involving the Staten Island University Hospital, Acosta sided with the majority that determined a union had violated the act by engaging in a series of verbal and abusive confrontations with hospital employees. In 2010, Acosta expressed concern about the relevance of the NLRB's future in an article in FIU, Florida International University, Law Review. He advocated for increased board rulemaking, similar to other administrative agencies that promulgate rules after notice and comment procedures. According to Acosta, structural changes would promote predictability, efficiency, and stability for the board. The confirmation process will likely reveal more about Acosta's views on the role of the Department of Labor in shaping employment policy. All right, so, it's a more traditional look at what he's all about. By the way, in case you were wondering, how did Acosta get an article into Florida International University's Law Review? Acosta currently serves as Dean of Florida International University's College of Law, a post he has held since 2009. So I guess that has a little bit of something to do with it. And I don't know how often the pages of a law review are handed over to the dean of the school, but I imagine it's not terribly uncommon. And why would you, if you're the dean of that school, that's going to be where you're going to want to publish. I wonder how common it is, though. Good question. All right. Well, anyway, just to let you know that is out there. Let's skim to a couple of other interesting things. How about this one? We're all still worried about this, right? Trump's taxes. This caught my eye over the weekend in Forbes. It was Twitter that brought my attention to what was going on in Forbes. Otherwise, I'd never know. I gotta wade through their ads here, but here's the title: Disclosing President Trump's Tax Returns, an Unconventional Idea. We heard some time ago about one of the possibilities of using the obscure, 1920s law as proposed by Bill Pascrell of New Jersey to try and request for the Ways and Means Committee to request the tax returns and to take a look at them in some confidence anyway. But I guess here's another approach to things, and I thought we might as well throw it out there and consider the process, make ourselves aware of the various tools people who concern themselves with such things have at their disposal. Let's see. This is Brian Kemp and Victor Thorogny. Thorogny? Good question on the pronunciation of that one, but let's see. Brian Kemp is a professor of law at Texas Tech. Mr. Thorogny was lead counsel for taxation at the IMF until his retirement in 2014. So let's see. That's this is an odd byline here. Let's see. It's a guest post at Forbes's blog, I guess. Written by these two. And then it says Keith Fogg, contributor. So I don't know whether this is, maybe it's Keith Fogg's column that he handed over to Brian Kemp and Victor Thoroni. Let's see. Lots of folks want to see Donald Trump's tax returns. That seems true. Conventional wisdom is that the returns cannot be disclosed unless he consents. That conventional wisdom is based on the general rule contained in 26 U.S. Code Section 6103A. The general rule forbids IRS employees and some folks who receive information from IRS employees from disclosing return information. That is a term of art that means not just tax returns, but also just about anything in the IRS files. Section 6103 is a really complex statute, mostly because of the exceptions to the general rule. The exceptions are found in subsections C through O. And I suppose if you have a subsection O, you are talking about a complex law. The exceptions balance a taxpayer's privacy with the needs of government officers and employers to do their jobs. And you know, there still are people who think that they should do those jobs. So the exceptions to the general rule can get quite gnarly. Several commentators have begun to explore some of the lesser-known exceptions to the general rule of non-disclosure. George Yin has a nice op-ed piece here in Linked that explains one exception to the general rule in Section 6103. Congress can ask for Trump's returns. Andy Gruel also explores this idea in a well-done post over at the Yale Regulation blog. Both posts are worth reading. Sounds like they may be referring to the same thing that Bill Pascrell referred to. Both George and Andy, first name basis, hey, focus on the power of certain congressional committees and staff to ask for tax returns as part of their oversight function. That power can be found in Section 6103 F1 through F4. This is complex. Democrats have acted on the ideas in George and Andy's blogs. Stephen Olemacher of the AP reports that Democrats on the House Ways and Means Committee tried to get the committee to ask for Trump's returns, but were outvoted by committee Republicans. Next up, the section entitled The Unconventional Idea. Ready? But what if the returns were dumped on the committee's lap by an IRS employee without the committee having made a request? That could happen under the very last paragraph in subsection F, aptly named. Section 6103 F5 is a whistleblower exception to the general rule of non-disclosure. It permits disclosure of tax returns to one of the tax writing committees by, quote, any person who otherwise has or had access to any return or return information under this section, unquote, when that person believes that, quote again, such return or return information may relate to possible misconduct, maladministration, or taxpayer abuse, unquote. The plain language of this provision suggests that an IRS employee who otherwise has authorized access to Trump's tax returns could blow the whistle on Trump if that employee believes Trump's tax returns related to possible misconduct or possible maladministration. I think it would be very difficult not to think that at this point. The statute does not say whose misconduct or whose maladministration the returns must relate to. An employee's concern could be that Trump's extensive business holdings and his well-documented refusal to divest himself of business relationships will create, or has already created, misconduct and maladministration on his part. For example, all of the profits from Trump's businesses still accrue to his benefit. That means when the federal government leases an entire floor of Trump Tower, for instance, for $1.5 million, Trump is directly benefiting from that decision. Or, for example, Trump might sign an executive order barring immigration from certain countries, but he might exclude from that order immigration from countries where he or his businesses own property and businesses. It does sound promising, doesn't it? Well, the next section says there are problems with the idea. However, they say, while Section 6103 F5 is a possible avenue for an IRS employee to blow the whistle on Trump, two obstacles make it a tricky one. First, despite the statute's broad language, the history of its enactment suggests that the language may refer only to the misconduct or maladministration by the IRS or its employees. Second, only an IRS employee who has proper access to return information is permitted to disclose. Here's the legislative history. Congress enacted Section 6103 F5 in 1998 as part of the IRS Restructuring and Reform Act of 1998, the RRA. RRA originated in the House as H.R. 2676, but the provision now codified in Section 6103 F5 was not in the House version. Is this took things? Holy moly. Okay, calm down. Let's just keep looking. All right. It came from the Senate Finance Committee's version. You can find all the documents and history of the bill at the link that they provide. And here, the Senate Finance Committee proposed creating a whistleblower exception to the general rule of Section 6103A. The proposal would have made the exception part of 6103 F1, and the proposed statutory language read as follows. And it would have, so let's see, the Senate Finance Committee proposed this whistleblower exception. They were going to put it in 6103 F1, and the language they proposed said, whistleblower information. Any person who otherwise has or had access to any return or return information under this section may disclose such return or return information to a chairman of a committee referred to in subparagraph A or the chief of staff of the Joint Committee on Taxation, only if, and we have to look at page 2 for this one, only if what? Only if, oh boy, we have to get through another ad here. Okay, come on. Continuing on. Only if, boy, this is a cliffhanger. Only if, ready? 1. The disclosure is for the purpose of alleging an incident of employee misconduct or taxpayer abuse. And 2. The chairman of the committee to which the disclosure is made, or either chairman in the case of disclosure to the chief of staff, gives prior written approval for the disclosure. Oh, that is tough. The Senate Finance Committee report explains that it is appropriate to have the opportunity to receive tax return information directly from whistleblowers. That, it notes, is on page 105 of the Senate Finance Committee report. Notice, however, the language chosen by the Senate tax writers limited the authority to blow the whistle. Disclosure was authorized only, quote, for the purpose of alleging an incident of employee misconduct or taxpayer abuse. The Senate Finance Committee report refers specifically to IRS employee or taxpayer abuse. The conference committee expanded the limiting language to the language that became the law. Under the expanded language, disclosure is authorized if the IRS employee making the disclosure believes that the return is related to possible misconduct, maladministration, or taxpayer abuse. The expansion, however, seems to stop short of expanding the idea of whose improper conduct is at issue. Under the Senate version, the improper conduct was explicitly linked to IRS employee misconduct or taxpayer abuse. The revised language expanded the kind of improper conduct to include maladministration. But whether the revised language expanded the idea to misconduct or maladministration by a government employee other than an IRS employee is unclear. Arguably, however, if the misconduct is relevant to misconduct of the sort that a congressional committee might investigate, then the broad language of the statute would cover it. Interesting, and it'll put conservative members of any court that reviews it in the interesting position of having to, for once, credit the legislative history rather than the black letter of what's on the page, what's in the law, as a source for guidance on how to interpret the final product, and they're usually very dismissive of that stuff. I guess unless it benefits the outcome that they really want, there is that real politic to it. Let's see. The next section here, the whistleblower must have access, right? Even if one reads Section 6103 F5 as authorizing an IRS employee to blow the whistle on a non-IRS government employee, like say the president, one large obstacle remains. Section 6103 F5 only applies when the IRS employee making the disclosure has authorized access to the return. This would mean that only the relatively narrow group of IRS employees who are authorized to view the returns for audit or other purposes would be eligible whistleblowers. That brings us back to Trump's claim that he is under audit. Remember that? If he is telling the truth about that, then there are certainly some IRS employees who have legitimate access to at least the returns being audited. Interesting. And of course, they would not be his people. They would be Obama administration people, because they were the ones allegedly auditing him. Congress, where were we? In addition, any other person, such as an employee of a state taxing agency who has properly received the returns from the IRS pursuant to the exceptions listed in 6103A3, would also have proper access. We do not explore the legal position for this group, however, since it would involve delving into potential state law prohibitions on their action. That would be a little tough. Congress has enacted a number of statutes that make willful violation of the disclosure rules a crime. First up, Section 7213, which imposes a fine of up to $5,000 and up to 5 years imprisonment for any willful violation of Section 6103. C.E.G. United States versus Ritchie, 924 F. 2nd 857, for those of you who know how to look up a citation like that. That's a Ninth Circuit opinion of 1991. In the criminal context, however, the Supreme Court has instructed that a good faith misunderstanding of the law, or a good faith belief that one is not violating the law, negates willfulness, whether or not the claimed belief or misunderstanding is objectively reasonable. That, according to Cheek versus the United States, a Supreme Court decision from 1991. Second, 18 U.S. Code Section 1030A2 makes the unauthorized access of government computers a felony. This provision includes the unauthorized access of returns or return information in government computer files. Third, in the RRA, Congress created 26 U.S. Code Section 7213A to specifically make the unauthorized inspection of returns or return information, whether on paper or computer files, a misdemeanor. That, according to Public Law 105-206 from 1998. Conclusion. Yes, please. We have never before had a president so vulnerable to conflicts of interest and, at the same time, so callous about his governing duties and so careless of the law. All of his own making, of course. I would add to that, this potent combination requires checks. It requires balances. Checks and balances are what have enabled this country to thrive for over 200 years. A review of Trump's tax returns is but a small part of what is necessary to check on his behavior. If the Congress does not have the political will to use its powers, there remains a possibility that a whistleblower from the IRS or a state agency could force the issue. Very interesting. And I wonder whether New York state agencies might not be in a very good position to do that. In fact, there would be a lot of state agencies probably in position to do it, but New York probably would be, I would guess, the safest politically. Well, very interesting, and certainly, well, man, I mean, I don't know how powerful a tool it is if the idea is that they can disclose this information to the chair of a congressional committee, because the chairs, presumably Republican chairs, would just sit on it. So I don't know. But I guess the fact that it was leaked, and then if you said I leaked it, and I'm invoking this provision of the law that makes it legal for me to do so, that would create an enormous problem for anyone who tried to then sit on it, on top of all that. I mean, I'm sure they would try and prosecute them, and I'm sure that they would try and raise this provision as a defense, but it would really make things difficult on the chair if they were known to be in possession of this information. I'd say there's some possibility there, although I will say this. The conclusion is a bit, I don't know what. What do we say about this? It's a bit weak in the sense that, I mean, the rest of the argument, of course, is statutory. The conclusion here, it's certainly true that we've never before had a president so vulnerable to conflicts of interest, it's more than being vulnerable to it. They're obvious on their face to everyone. Everyone can see it. And we've never had a president who cared so little for that and figured that he was invulnerable to charges of that. All of this is true. All of the citation to code is solid. Then the idea of, well, this has to be allowed because checks and balances. I mean, that's it's true and it's fundamental and it's kind of reached the level where it's axiomatic, and no one's going to argue against the necessity of checks and balances because that's just been drummed into our heads for too long. But it's interesting that this very specific argument about a very specific statute ends with, well, we all know checks and balances are good, right? And this is a check and a balance. So there you go. There's some additional work that needs to be done in developing that. But for purposes of an article like this, I think it makes the point pretty well. The oral argument about the necessity of checks and balances, the centrality of checks and balances in court would likely also have to include examples of these kinds of provisions fitting squarely within our understanding of what checks and balances are all about, and then probably some work in reading us the Federalists' papers about the specific value of checks and balances, and even then, those aren't government documents, the Federalists. But they're ones that's funny, too. I just got done a few minutes ago, probably about 15 minutes ago, telling you that conservative court hates legislative history, generally speaking, because legislative history, well, the reason they hate legislative history traditionally is that for most of the several decades prior to the development of the conservative judicial doctrine that legislative history was bull, was a time in which Democrats had an unbreakable grip on the legislature. I mean, really, it was the Reagan era forward in which conservative judges and justices went on the warpath against relying on legislative history as an authoritative source in statutory interpretation. And that was because prior to that point, and then prior to the 1994 Republican Revolution led by Newt Gingrich, Congress, particularly the House, had been in Democratic hands solidly for some 40 plus years. The Senate also for most of that time. So Republicans obviously hated not only the legislation, but therefore the legislative history as well, because the legislative history was usually pointed to give broader reading to laws that they already hated and doubted the legitimacy of. Anyway, they got stuck with that position because they were so busy insisting that that was a principled position of conservative opposition to big government. And then they got stuck with it. And then all of a sudden, soon thereafter, there was a period in which the most current legislation, and therefore perhaps you might conclude the most frequently tested legislation had been crafted by Republicans, and all of a sudden legislative history might in fact mean something because it had been written by Republicans. Well, interestingly, so I think they find themselves in a bit of a conundrum with that rather recently developed doctrine about legislative history. The other kind of legislative history that they really love is the legislative history of, although a lot of it was written after the fact, but it was offered up as a legislative history of the Constitution, the Federalist Papers. Anonymous sources, by the way, which the White House hates, but we figured out who those anonymous sources were over the years. But yeah, I mean, that's supposed to serve, or it's certainly offered up frequently enough as a sort of legislative history of the Constitution. And they love that legislative history to death, do our conservative justices. Oddly. Anyway, I think that's pretty interesting. All right, let's see. What else do we need to catch up on that has been planted in pocket? I thought that was well worth the time. An esoteric piece, to be sure, but good for Kagro in the morning topic, I think. Let's see. I mentioned at the outset, of course, that today is day 30 following the issuance of Donald Trump's presidential memorandum ordering the Pentagon to come up with an answer on how to fight ISIS, because he had only a secret plan that he couldn't tell us because of how secret it was. Now it turns out that might be, let's use the F-35 fighter because it's supposedly awesome. And why wouldn't our most awesome weapon be any good against our big enemy? And I guess the answer is, what would you need air superiority for against a force that doesn't have an air element to it? I don't know. Maybe it's more complex than that. Meanwhile, though, he's asked the Pentagon to come up with a plan. That means Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis. And apparently, it's not out of the realm of possibility that he may be ready to make a presentation today. This, according to the New York Times, hinting at it in their piece. The first big test for Mattis: pitch plans to fight ISIS and not alienate Trump. That's the big problem. He's had 30 days, but he hasn't been able to figure out how not to alienate Trump with a plan that he can still actually execute. The Dateline, Washington, it reads thus. This is a piece by Helene Cooper and Eric Schmidt. As Defense Secretary Jim Mattis prepares to submit his first big pitch to his new boss, options for accelerating the fight against the Islamic State, he is balancing the need to rein in President Trump's more extreme impulses without distancing himself too much and losing White House favor. Mr. Mattis, a retired Marine general, has already assumed an outsized role in the administration, part valued aide to the new president, who has quickly come to adore him, and part reassurer-in-chief to global leaders who cling to his every utterance in the hope that he will help keep the White House from undoing decades of national security policy. Nowhere is this juggling act clearer than in the decisions confronting Mr. Mattis about speeding the fight against the Islamic State. Mr. Trump made that fight a centerpiece of his national security strategy during the campaign, saying he would give his generals 30 days to produce a plan to defeat the group, and he has urged an alliance with Russia to combat the militants in Syria, but such a move is anathema to Mr. Mattis, who has said repeatedly that he does not view Russia as a trustworthy partner. For all of Mr. Trump's bombast about the fight against the Islamic State, he said as a candidate that he would bomb the hell out of militants, take out their families, and take the oil. Shoo, war crimes. Pentagon leaders said they were preparing more nuanced options. General Joseph F. Dunford, Jr., the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, suggested last week that the initial plan may extend beyond the Islamic State strongholds in Iraq and Syria, and that it may look at how the militant group rose to power in the first place and how to fight this ideology. This is not about Syria and Iraq, General Dunford said at the Brookings Institution in Washington. The Islamic State, he noted, is at one point numbered 45,000 foreign fighters from more than 100 countries. Our plan, to be successful, needs to, number one, cut the connective tissue between regional groups that now form a trans-regional threat. Mr. Mattis will probably present Mr. Trump a range of options that include loosening some battlefield restrictions, sounds like something he'd like, and allowing American troops to get closer to the fight. He may also recommend putting a limited number of additional troops on the ground in Syria. But Pentagon officials said there was little appetite in the Defense Department for a full-fledged American military mission in Syria that would include thousands of additional combat troops. Any such move could leave the United States responsible for picking up the pieces after a defeat of the Islamic State. General Dunford said the Pentagon's goal was to outline the options for dealing with the Islamic State while at the same time making clear the risks associated with each one. The firing of General Flynn as a national security advisor and the arrival of General McMaster in his place, Mr. Mattis's hand has been strengthened in the national security structure. Like Mr. Mattis, General McMaster has no previous links to Mr. Trump and is not seen as being driven by ideology, which could not be said about Mr. Flynn. A battle-tested veteran of the Persian Gulf War of 1991 and the Iraq War, McMaster, like Mr. Mattis, is considered to be one of the military's most independent-minded officers. After Mr. Trump's first choice, Robert S. Harward, a retired vice admiral who is a former Navy SEAL, declined the national security advisor job, Mr. Mattis encouraged General McMaster to take it, turning what could have been a disastrous turn of events for him into a success. Inside the Pentagon, civilian and military officers appear to be relishing the fact that so far Mr. Mattis has protected them from many of the ups and downs coming out of the White House. During a recent talk with policy officials at the Defense Department, Mr. Mattis told people to stay strong and keep going in the right direction, in many cases largely the direction they had already been going, according to the former senior military official who speaks frequently with his former colleagues. The former official said Mr. Mattis appears to be pushing for greater expertise in the Pentagon and had asked officials not to change jobs so frequently that they are not able to become true experts. Well, that all sounds fairly sensible. Let's wrap it up here. An avid reader, Mr. Mattis also said he wants the Defense Department's regional desks to be able to think the way people in their respective countries would think. He wants military officials to have read the literature of the country in which they specialize and to really understand those countries, not just the issues that affect bilateral relations with the U.S. At the Pentagon last week, Mr. Mattis showed up unannounced and without aides in the Middle East Policy Office to ask a question of one of the desk officers. He's already been on 2 overseas diplomatic missions in the month since Mr. Trump took power. He's been to Asia, where he reassured South Korean and Japanese officials that, contrary to Mr. Trump's campaign musings, they should perhaps develop their own nuclear weapons to save the United States money that it now spends to protect them. The U.S. was not going to abandon decades of non-proliferation policy. He also went to Europe, where he reassured nations that, contrary to Mr. Trump's post-campaign musings that NATO was obsolete, the United States still valued the transatlantic alliance. And he went to Iraq, saying before arriving in Baghdad that, contrary to Mr. Trump's musings, we're not in Iraq to seize anybody's oil. Some Defense Department officials privately expressed concern about whether Mr. Mattis, in reassuring American allies, might alienate the White House. Well worth considering. Anyway, we're supposed to take, or I suggest that you take that as at least the first part of the article, that he is in fact ready to meet that 30-day deadline that was 1 week late in its issuance because Trump had to play some golf. Anyway, so we'll be on the lookout for that and see what results. Let's see. Other interesting things. Oh, yes. Here's one of the latest developments on the Russia front. We haven't called Wilbur Ross's name on the Russia front just yet, but the Miami Herald, of all places, is in my... it's not like I've never read anything from the Miami Herald. It's just I stumbled across this in a weird way. Was it written for the Herald? McClatchy, D.C. took care of this one, and I guess... I don't know, is the Herald a McClatchy paper, or I don't even know what, I'm not even sure exactly what the relationship is. But at any rate, I found it in the Miami Herald. That's where you'll find it, because that's the link I'm going to give you. Exclusive. Trump commerce pick Wilbur Ross faces new Russia questions. Here's an angle I hadn't seen before, and we might as well add it to the mix. Commerce Secretary nominee Wilbur Ross, still awaiting confirmation, faces new questions about his banking ties to Russia. The latest member of the Trump team, gee whiz, to be embroiled in the controversy over alleged ties to the Kremlin. Ross was sent a letter late Thursday by 6 Democratic senators questioning the billionaire financier about his ownership stake in the Bank of Cyprus, on which he still serves as vice chairman of the board of directors. The 6 senators demanded answers about his relationship with Viktor Vekselberg, the second largest shareholder in the bank. The letter started reporting by McClatchy last December about Vekselberg, who sits atop the Renova Corporation, a Russian conglomerate. Aside from his friendship with Russian leader Vladimir Putin, which you gotta be in order to be a successful business tycoon in Russia, aside from his friendship with Putin, Vekselberg at one time served on the board of directors of the Russian state-controlled oil giant, you've heard it before, Rosneft. It is under a partial sanction by the U.S. Treasury Department. The senators, led by Florida Democrat Bill Nelson, also want to know about Ross's relationship with Vladimir, Strzelecki, I'm going to guess, a former vice chairman of the Bank of Cyprus, also a former KGB agent and believed to be a longtime associate of Putin. The letter sent to Ross on Thursday afternoon noted that Russian shareholders had at one point been the largest stakeholders in the bank he rescued in September 2014 amid a financial crisis in Cyprus. And here it gets a little bit confusing. Are we saying, did Wilbur Ross personally bail out the Bank of Cyprus? What? Senators joining Nelson, the top Democrat on the Senate Commerce Committee, were Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, Ed Markey of Massachusetts, Tom Udall of New Mexico, Cory Booker of New Jersey, and Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin. And they posed this question: are you aware of any loans made by the Bank of Cyprus to the Trump Organization, either directly or through another financial institution, its directors or officers, or any affiliated individuals or entities? If so, please detail the amount and terms of any such loans, the senators asked in one of 6 detailed questions. The letter comes as congressional and law enforcement probes widen into possible ties between members of the Trump campaign and the Kremlin, which stands accused by U.S. intelligence agencies of meddling in last year's U.S. election with email hacking and distributing fake news. At a contentious news conference Thursday, Trump repeated that he knew of no one in his campaign who had ties to Russia and that he did not do business there. I own nothing in Russia. I have no loans in Russia. I don't have any deals in Russia, Trump said, carefully choosing his words, they note. Trump's campaign team members' ties to Russia made headlines, of course, last summer, with the emails being hacked out of the DNC, published by WikiLeaks. U.S. intelligence agencies all agree that Putin ordered a broad operation to interfere with the election. Several people who worked in Trump's campaign have joined the administration have controversial ties to Russia. We know who they are, of course. Rex Tillerson did business with Putin. General Flynn, who retired, apparently failing to inform Mike Pence and others about the conversations he had with the Russian ambassador. Let's see. Paul Manafort, of course, who left in August after it was revealed that he had these business ties with the Ukrainian president, or former Ukrainian president. But Ross, that's a new one. Other questions asked of Ross in the senator's letter included whether there were any ties between the current or former bank officials in the Trump Organization or Trump campaign, and whether anyone with ownership interest in the bank sought to directly or indirectly influence the U.S. election of American policy positions. Although Ross cleared the Senate Commerce Committee on January 24th, a vote on his confirmation is not expected until the final days of the month. The White House had no comment on the senator's letter. Cyprus is often used by Russia's politically connected businessmen, I guess like Iceland was. In a March 2013 report, McClatchy detailed how Russians had come to dominate Cyprus as both customers and providers of financial services. Russian depositors and investors took losses that year in Cyprus when the European debt crisis nearly crumbled major banks. Ross, 79, I did not realize that, made his fortunes buying bankrupt companies in the steel, coal, and telecommunications sectors, of course including the Sago mine in West Virginia, right, and selling them after they'd returned to health or killed all their workers. Forbes magazine estimated his net worth was at least $2.5 billion this month. His investment group took an 18% stake in the bank in September of 2014, and he was vice chairman of the bank when Trump nominated him late last year. He was expected to resign from that post if confirmed by the Senate, which could happen, well, I'd say that would be this week. Bloomberg reported in late December that Ross wouldn't completely divest of his holdings in the bank even if he stepped aside. As the lead investor in the Bank of Cyprus, Ross was instrumental in creating its new board of directors. He tapped as its chairman Joseph Ackerman, the retired CEO of Germany's Deutsche Bank. Now we're getting somewhere. The Trump Organization has debt with Deutsche Bank, which loaned it more than $364 million in recent years and more than $3 billion since the 1990s. Deutsche Bank, under Ackerman, repeatedly ran afoul of U.S. and European regulators. Most recently, the bank agreed on January 31st to pay $630 million in fines to end investigations in New York and London into complex trades in Russia that regulators thought might reflect money laundering. The settlement did not end an ongoing Department of Justice probe, but I imagine Jeff Sessions can help take care of that. In the senator's first question in the Thursday letter, they cited a post-confirmation hearing question from Senator Maria Cantwell of Washington asking about Ross's relationship with Russian investors in the Bank of Cyprus. His answer in a January 22nd letter back to her was that he did not have any relationship prior to his investment in the bank and had only met with the main Russian investor once for an hour. Please provide details of this meeting, including the person or persons involved, dates and topics, the Thursday letter asked. A quiet entree into a new line of questioning about Russian-American business relationships. Interesting, because, I guess I'll put it to you this way. Did you have any indication prior to the selection of Wilbur Ross that he played any kind of role in Trump world whatsoever? Is it just supposed to be, well, he knows a lot of billionaires because he's a billionaire and he loves talking about money, and so do some other billionaires, so why not? He just invited them. Or, because there's a lot of billionaires out there, believe it or not, and I know you aren't one, I'm not one. If we have any billionaire listeners, by the way, I'll remind you, take a look at patreon.com/KagroX and send your billions that way. An interesting new entree into the Russian relationship, quagmire, I guess. I don't even know what to call it. I hadn't, to this point, known about Wilbur Ross and his possible connections, but it does make me wonder, where the hell did Wilbur Ross come from in Trump land? I would have expected to just find out that he was a member of Mar-a-Lago or something, which is also troubling in its own way. But what if he's Commerce Secretary because Donald Trump owes a bank that he controls millions of dollars, and Trump thought he could pay him back this way instead of with cash? Wow. Well, another interesting and late entry, and another good reason to slow down every single one of these nominations as much as possible. So far, so good on the Senate front about that one. Things may yet change. We'll keep an eye on those things and keep you up to date. And in the meantime, time to hand things over to the guys on the after show. Wink and Justice have prepared this agenda for you today. Sean Spicer's staff leaked the news of Sean Spicer confiscating staff phones and other electronic devices in an effort to stop White House leaks to the media. Funny, the White House enlisted the CIA director and both the House and Senate Intel chairman to push back on the Russian reports. And the White House says it's too early to decide on a special prosecutor to investigate Russian meddling. How surprising. For the last half, they'll be reporting that a renowned French historian and expert on Vichy, France, and the Holocaust is detained for 10 hours by U.S. Customs on his way to a conference in Texas.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
We are also getting ever closer as Russian efforts are ramping up. The far-right white nationalist Marine Le Pen could win the French presidency. That election happening in May. They'll keep you up to date on what's happening there. I'll be back tomorrow to update you on what's happening here. We'll both be doing that. Stay tuned then for the after show with Wink and Justice.